My unfaithful wife insisted on a relationship pause while secretly meeting another man and spending my savings on restaurant dates. So I blocked all her cards, gathered evidence, and with my lawyer summoned her to court for marriage dissolution. Sup Reddit. My name is Jake, and I'm a 29-year-old HVAC technician who's been working in the trade for about 10 years now. I run my own crew and make solid money. Nothing crazy, but we live comfortably enough. My wife Lisa is 30 and works in graphic design for some mid-size advertising agency in Midtown. We've been married for 4 years and together for 6 years total. We haven't had kids yet, and while we've been talking about it, we never felt rushed about that decision. You know how it is when you're in your late 20s. There's always time for that conversation later. I first met Lisa at a buddy's birthday party back in 2017. I'm not usually the type to chat up random women at parties, but there was something special about her that caught my attention immediately. She was smart as hell and could hold her own in conversations about absolutely anything, from sports to politics to random trivia that would come up throughout the night. She was pretty in that genuine girl-next-door way, not Instagram model hot, but the kind of woman you actually want to wake up next to every morning and still find beautiful without makeup. We came from completely different worlds, which made our connection even more surprising. She had her college degree and worked in a modern office environment with fancy espresso machines and foosball tables, while I showed up to work every day in cargo pants and steel-toe boots. I spent my days crawling through cramped crawl spaces and installing ductwork in the brutal Florida heat, getting my hands dirty with honest work. But somehow, despite our different backgrounds, it just worked between us. What I loved most about Lisa was that she never acted like she was better than me or made me feel stupid for not having some fancy degree hanging on my wall. We moved in together after about 1.5 years of dating, got engaged on our 3-year anniversary, and got married the following fall. Life was genuinely good. Really, really good. I felt like I'd found my person, someone who understood and appreciated me for who I was. That's exactly why what happened last Wednesday hit me like a freight train when I least expected it. I was sitting at our kitchen table eating leftover Chinese food from the night before, casually scrolling through my phone while Lisa finished up some work emails on her laptop. Nothing seemed off at all. It was just another normal evening in our routine. We'd just gotten back from a long weekend trip to the Keys, where we'd had an amazing time together. We'd shared lots of laughs, enjoyed good intimacy, and everything seemed perfect between us. Then she closed her laptop with a deliberate click and got this weird, serious look on her face that I'd never seen before. "Jake, I think we need to take a short break," she said, her voice carefully measured in a way that immediately made my stomach drop. I literally stopped chewing my food and stared at her. "Break from what? From us?" I asked, genuinely confused because this was coming from absolutely nowhere. "I need some time to clear my head and figure some things out," she continued, avoiding direct eye contact. Now I was thinking, maybe she was having some kind of delayed quarter-life crisis or something similar that I just hadn't picked up on. "Clear your head about what exactly? Did I do something wrong?" I asked, trying to understand where this was suddenly coming from. No, it's not you," she said quickly, which struck me as the most cliché breakup line in history. "I just feel like I'm losing myself in this routine. I love you, but I need some space to figure out who I am outside of being married." This whole conversation was coming from absolutely nowhere, and it made no sense to me. We had literally just spent 4 days together having deep, meaningful conversations about everything under the sun. If she was having some kind of identity crisis, when the hell was she planning to mention it? How do you hide something that significant from your spouse? "For how long?" I asked, trying my best to keep my voice level and not sound as panicked as I was starting to feel inside. "Maybe 10 days. I can stay at Beth's place," she said, referring to her college roommate who lived across town in one of those new apartment complexes with the fancy gym and infinity pool. They hung out maybe once a month, usually grabbing cocktails and doing normal friend stuff, so it seemed reasonable enough on the surface. "Give us both time to think," she added, as if this was some mutual decision we'd arrived at together. "And what exactly does this break look like? Are we still—" I started to ask the obvious question that any married person would need clarified in this situation. "Exclusive? Yes." She cut me off real quick, almost like she'd been expecting that exact question. "This isn't about other people, Jake. This is about me needing space to process things." The whole conversation felt strangely rehearsed, like she'd been practicing these lines in her head for days or even weeks. Every response came too quickly, too smoothly, as if she'd anticipated every question I might ask. But I didn't want to be that paranoid husband who loses his mind every time his wife wants some independence or personal space. Marriage requires trust, and I'd always prided myself on being the kind of husband who could give his wife room to breathe when she needed it. So I took a deep breath, pushed down my growing unease, and said, "Okay, if that's what you need, then that's what we'll do." She looked relieved when I said that. Suspiciously relieved, if I'm being completely honest. The tension seemed to drain from her shoulders immediately, and she came over to hug me tightly. She said she loved me and that this would make us stronger in the long run. All the usual reassuring things you'd expect to hear. Then she went upstairs and packed a bag with just the basics, enough clothes and toiletries for a few days. She was gone within an hour of that conversation. I helped her load her stuff into our car. Well, technically my car since the title was in my name, but we'd always shared it like everything else in our marriage. We hugged goodbye in the driveway, and I told her to text me when she got to Beth's place safely. Then, I found myself standing alone in my driveway, watching my wife drive away to find herself, feeling like something was seriously wrong, but not being able to put my finger on exactly what it was. That night, I sat on my couch eating a pathetic frozen dinner, and the house felt way too quiet and empty. The whole situation kept bugging me, gnawing at my thoughts like an itch I couldn't scratch. It wasn't necessarily the break itself that bothered me. Couples go through rough patches, and sometimes space can be healthy. But it was the way she had presented it that felt off. Everything had been too smooth, too prepared, like she'd been planning this exact conversation for a while. Around 10:30 p.m., I decided to text Beth just to make sure Lisa had gotten there okay, and everything was cool between them. I sent a simple message. "Hey, just wanted to make sure Lisa made it to your place all right. Thanks for letting her crash there." Beth texted back about 25 minutes later, and her response made my blood run cold. "What? I haven't talked to Lisa in like 2 weeks. Is everything okay? Did something happen?" That was the exact moment I knew I was getting played. My wife of 4 years, who had just asked for a break to find herself and work on personal growth, had lied to me about where she was staying on day one. I sat there staring at my phone, reading Beth's message over and over again, feeling this cold knot forming in my stomach. If Lisa wasn't at Beth's place like she'd told me, where the hell was she? And more importantly, why had she felt the need to lie about it right from the start? That's when I started paying attention to things I used to ignore. And let me tell you, once you start looking for lies in your relationship, you find them everywhere. Thursday morning, I called in sick to work, telling my crew I had food poisoning. Which wasn't totally a lie since my stomach was twisted in knots from everything that had happened. I made some coffee and sat at the kitchen table, trying to figure out my next move and what I should do with this new information. That's when I noticed our shared laptop sitting on the counter. There was nothing unusual about that. We used it for budgeting, checking email, streaming Hulu on the big TV, and other normal household stuff. Lisa was always logged into her accounts because she handled most of our online bills and banking responsibilities. I wasn't planning to snoop, I swear. But then I opened it up to check our bank account, wanting to see if there were any charges that might tell me where she actually was instead of Beth's place. And that's when I saw the Slack notification pop up in the corner from someone named Derek Rivera, her coworker at the advertising agency. The message preview said, "Last night was incredible. Can't believe we pulled that off right under his nose." My blood went ice cold. I just stared at that notification for what felt like 45 seconds, not wanting to click on it because I knew that once I did, there would be no going back to my normal life. But I also knew I had to see what was in there. I clicked on it, and the full conversation loaded up. What I found was months of messages. Months of them going back to February, while I was working 14-hour days installing AC units in some office complex downtown. She had been planning afternoon client meetings that were really hotel visits with this guy. I started scrolling through this conversation history, and it just kept getting worse and worse. Some highlights from their greatest hits collection included messages like, "Room 315 at the Hilton Midtown, same time tomorrow, and your husband working late again? Perfect timing, and can't wait to taste you again." There were also photos that I'm not going to describe in detail, but let's just say they definitely weren't discussing quarterly design projects or work deadlines. Then I found this exchange that made everything crystal clear. "When are you going to tell him? I'm tired of sneaking around," Derek had written. Lisa's response was, "After I take this break, give me 10 days to figure out the cleanest exit." That last exchange was from Tuesday night. the night before she asked for our break. This whole thing wasn't some spontaneous soul-searching mission like she'd made it sound. It was a calculated exit strategy that she'd been planning with her affair partner. She was using these 10 days to figure out how to leave me while making it look like my fault for not being supportive of her personal growth journey or whatever story she was planning to spin to our friends and family. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every photo, every timestamp. My hands were shaking, but I made sure to get it all documented properly. Then, I started cross-referencing our shared calendar and bank statements, looking for patterns that would confirm what I was seeing in these messages. Remember that client dinner she had to attend last month? There was a hotel charge for $172 on the same night. That late meeting with the creative team she mentioned? There was an ATM withdrawal for $80 near Derek's apartment complex. Yeah, I looked up his address online. Every girls' night with Beth had another hotel charge, this time for $201. The pattern became crystal clear once you knew what to look for. Every work event that kept her out late had corresponding charges that didn't make sense for legitimate business purposes. Every girls' night that I couldn't join had financial evidence pointing somewhere else entirely. But here's what really pissed me off the most. She was using our joint account to pay for this affair. Our money that I earned crawling through attics and pulling ductwork in 95-degree heat, was funding her romantic escapades with some creative director pretty boy who probably doesn't know which end of a wrench to hold. I went through 4 months of bank statements methodically and found at least $2,300 in hotel charges, restaurant bills, and random ATM withdrawals that lined up perfectly with her supposed work obligations. This Derek guy was getting the full girlfriend experience on my dime, and I was footing the bill for every romantic dinner and hotel room. The more I dug into the evidence, the angrier I got. This wasn't just hurt or betrayal. I was absolutely furious. This wasn't some moment of weakness or emotional affair that had gotten out of hand over a few weeks. This was planned, methodical, calculated deception that had been going on for months. She'd been living a complete double life, lying to my face every single day while plotting her exit strategy. I found their vacation planning messages too, which made everything even more infuriating. Apparently, after our marriage naturally ended, her exact words, they were planning to take a romantic trip to Belize. And guess what they were planning to fund this dream vacation with? Money from our joint savings account, of course. They had the whole thing mapped out in detail. She'd get half of everything in the divorce plus alimony since I made more money. And then they'd ride off into the sunset together like some kind of romantic movie. Derek was even helping her research divorce lawyers, which showed just how deep this conspiracy went. I found messages where he was sending her links to articles about maximizing your settlement and protecting your interests during separation proceedings. Real romantic stuff. Planning how to financially screw over her husband while they planned their future together. But you know what? Instead of losing my shit like they probably expected me to do, I got calm. Scary calm, actually. Because now I had a choice to make. I could either be the devastated husband who begs her to come back and promises to change everything about himself, or I could be the guy who plays chess while they're playing checkers. I chose chess. By Friday morning, I had developed a comprehensive plan. Not an emotional, revenge-driven plan that would backfire on me, but a strategic, legal, bulletproof plan to protect myself from someone who had already decided to destroy our marriage while maximizing her personal benefit. Lisa wanted to play games with my life and finances? Fine. But she was about to find out that HVAC technicians are actually pretty good at planning complex projects too. And unlike her little scheme with Derek, mine was going to be completely legal and totally devastating. The first order of business was finding a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone who specialized in divorce cases involving adultery and knew how to protect assets from cheating spouses. I did some research online and kept seeing the same name pop up in reviews and recommendations. Patricia Chen. The reviews said she was ruthless, but fair, and had a solid reputation for going after cheating spouses and making them pay for their betrayal. Her office was located midtown in one of those fancy glass buildings where parking costs more per hour than some people make in a day. I felt a little out of place walking in there wearing my work boots and jeans, but her receptionist was professional about it and didn't make me feel unwelcome. I managed to get scheduled for a consultation that same afternoon. Patricia turned out to be exactly what I needed for this situation. She was in her mid-40s, sharp as hell, with this no-nonsense attitude that told me she'd seen every trick in the book when it came to cheating spouses and divorce manipulation. Her office walls were covered with certificates and awards, including one for Family Law Attorney of the Year. This woman clearly knew her stuff. "So what's your situation?" she asked, getting straight to the point without any small talk. 4-year marriage, no kids, wife's cheating with a coworker. I laid it out as clearly and concisely as possible. She asked for a break to figure herself out, but really she's planning her exit strategy. I want to protect everything I brought into this marriage and everything we've built together. "Do you have proof of the affair?" she asked, which was exactly the question I'd been hoping for. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken of all the Slack messages. She scrolled through them with this perfect poker face, nodding occasionally as she read. When she got to the part about them planning to use our money for their Belize trip, she actually smiled slightly. "This is excellent documentation," she said, looking up from my phone. "Your state allows fault-based divorce for adultery, which means she forfeits any claim to alimony. With this evidence, we can also argue she used marital funds to facilitate the affair, which is dissipation of assets." "What does that mean in regular English?" I asked. "It means she owes you money for every hotel room and dinner she paid for with your joint account while screwing around," Patricia explained with satisfaction. I liked Patricia immediately. Her straightforward approach and clear understanding of the legal implications gave me confidence that I was in capable hands. She explained my options in detail. Since we had solid proof of adultery, I could file for fault-based divorce, which would not only kill any alimony claims, but also give me significant leverage in asset division. The house situation was going to be tricky, she explained. I had owned it before our marriage, but 4 years of improvements and mortgage payments had made it partially marital property under state law. However, Patricia continued, if we could show that Lisa was planning to defraud me during the marriage, we might be able to protect more of my separate property. Those messages about researching divorce strategies while still married could be considered evidence of fraud and bad faith on her part. Even better, Lisa's use of joint funds for the affair constituted what Patricia called economic adultery, basically stealing marital money to fund her cheating. Every hotel bill, every dinner with Derek, every ATM withdrawal near his place was money she owed back to the marriage estate. We filed the paperwork that same afternoon. Patricia prepared an emergency motion to freeze our joint accounts pending divorce proceedings. Since I could prove Lisa was using marital funds for extramarital activities, the court would likely grant it the same day. Her debit card will be declined by tomorrow morning, Patricia explained with professional satisfaction. She'll have access to whatever cash she has on hand, but no more joint account access until this gets sorted out. Next was comprehensive asset protection. Patricia had me make a detailed list of everything we owned. The house, cars, my work truck and tools, retirement accounts, savings, even my collection of vintage motorcycle parts I'd been building since high school. We needed to determine what was separate property, things I owned before marriage, versus marital property that had been acquired during our 4 years together. The house was going to be the biggest asset to protect. I'd put down $35,000 from inheritance money when I bought it at 25, then paid about $48,000 in mortgage payments during our marriage. Lisa had contributed maybe $12,000 total to household expenses over 4 years, mostly utilities and groceries, while I handled the mortgage, insurance, and major repairs. "We'll argue the house appreciation was due to your labor and investment," Patricia said confidently. "You did the renovations yourself, correct?" "Yeah, I personally rewired the whole place, updated the plumbing, refinished the floors, built a screened porch, and landscaped the yard. Probably added $65,000 in value through my own work," I told her. "That sweat equity belongs to you, not the marriage," she said. "What did Lisa contribute to those improvements?" "She helped pick out paint colors," I said, and Patricia actually chuckled at that. Then we talked strategy. Filing immediately would catch Lisa completely off guard since she thought she had 10 days to plan her moves carefully. But there was more we could do to gather evidence. "The car she's driving," Patricia asked, "whose name is on the title?" "Mine only. I bought it before we got married and never added her to the registration," I replied. "Then it's your property, which means you can legally put a GPS tracker on it if you want to document where she's actually staying," she suggested. "Just make sure you keep detailed records of everything you find." That was a brilliant idea. I stopped by Best Buy on the way home and bought a magnetic GPS tracker, one of those little devices hunters use to track their gear. It cost me $95, but it seemed like a solid investment in gathering evidence. That night, I waited until around 11:30 p.m., then drove over to Derek's apartment complex. It took me about 25 minutes to find our car parked in the visitor parking area. The GPS tracker was about the size of a matchbox, magnetic and completely invisible once you stuck it up under the rear bumper. 3 minutes later, I was back in my truck heading home with a way to monitor every move Lisa made. Now I'd know exactly where Lisa was going and how long she stayed there, with timestamps and GPS coordinates as evidence. Friday morning, I checked the tracker app on my phone and confirmed what I already suspected. She had spent the entire night at 1534 Pine Street, apartment 4C. A quick Google search confirmed that address belonged to one Derek Rivera, aged 26, creative director at the same company where Lisa worked. So much for staying at Beth's place to do some soul searching and figure herself out. She was shacked up with her affair partner on night one of our supposed break. But here's what made this even better. I now had GPS evidence that would hold up in court. Timestamps showing exactly when she arrived at his place, how long she stayed when she left. All automatically recorded and saved to my phone with precise location data. Patricia called around noon with an update that made my day even better. The court granted our emergency motion, she said. Lisa's access to joint accounts is officially frozen as of 3 p.m. Friday. Her debit card will start declining within hours. She'll probably call you panicked about the accounts, Patricia warned me. Don't admit to anything specific. Just tell her you're protecting marital assets during the separation period, which is completely legal and standard procedure. I was ready for that conversation. In fact, I was looking forward to it. The GPS tracker showed Lisa leaving Derek's place around 3:30 p.m. Friday, probably heading back to work for the end of the day. I was curious to see how long it would take her to figure out that her financial situation had dramatically changed. As it turned out, not very long at all. My phone rang at exactly 5:12 p.m. with Lisa's ringtone. "Jake, what the hell did you do?" she said, skipping right past any normal greeting. "My card just got declined at the grocery store," she continued, her voice tight with panic. "Oh, that," I said, keeping my voice as calm and casual as possible. "Yeah, I froze our joint accounts. Just protecting marital assets during our separation period. It's standard procedure," I explained matter-of-factly. "You can't do that! That's my money too!" she protested, sounding genuinely outraged. "Actually, I can and I did," I replied calmly. "You wanted space, remember? This is what space looks like when you're married. Separate finances until we figure out what we're doing." She went quiet for a long moment, probably realizing that her little plan to fund her affair with our joint money had just hit a major roadblock. "This is ridiculous, Jake. I need access to our account," she said, trying to sound reasonable. "For what? I thought you were staying at Beth's place just doing some soul searching," I said. "How much money do you need for soul searching?" Another long pause. She was clearly trying to figure out how to explain needing money without admitting where she really was or what she was really doing with her time. I need gas money and food, basic stuff," she finally said. "You've got your own checking account with your paycheck money. Use that," I suggested. "That only has like $180 in it," she admitted, which meant she'd been using our joint account for absolutely everything while keeping her own money completely separate. Real nice, building her own nest egg while spending mine on daily expenses and affair-related activities. "Sounds like a budgeting problem," I said. "Maybe this break will help you figure out how to manage money better too." She hung up on me without another word. The next morning, the GPS tracker showed she was still at Derek's place, apparently requiring a lot of overnight stays for her soul-searching journey. What an amazing coincidence that personal growth required so much time at her coworker's apartment. Sunday afternoon, Patricia called with more good news. Lisa's lawyer, yeah, she'd already hired one, which tells me everything about how spontaneous this break really was, reached out wanting to discuss temporary support during separation. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That we'd be happy to discuss temporary support once their client stops committing adultery and using marital funds to do it," Patricia replied with obvious satisfaction. Funny how that shut down the conversation real quick. After that, the tracker showed some very interesting movement patterns. Lisa was bouncing between Derek's apartment, several different ATMs where she was probably maxing out daily withdrawal limits, and what looked like a Target and grocery store. The girl was clearly scrambling to figure out her money situation now that the joint account gravy train had been cut off. Around 4 p.m. Sunday, she pulled into our driveway. I watched from the living room window as she sat in the car for what had to be 7 minutes, probably rehearsing whatever story she was going to try to sell me. When she finally got out, I could tell she'd been crying. Her hair was a mess. She was wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago, and she looked generally like someone whose master plan was falling apart in real time. The doorbell rang even though she still had her keys. I guess she was trying to be respectful or something. Too little, too late. But I suppose points for effort. "Hey, Jake," she said when I opened the door, trying to sound casual, but her voice was noticeably shaky. "Can we talk?" "Sure, come on in," I said, stepping aside. I'd been waiting for this conversation all weekend. She walked into our living room, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. She was probably noticing how normal everything looked, how I wasn't sitting in the dark drinking or surrounded by empty pizza boxes like some heartbroken movie character would be. "So," she said, settling onto the couch where we used to watch Netflix together on better nights, "this thing with the bank accounts is pretty extreme, don't you think?" "Is it?" I asked, sitting in my recliner across from her. "You wanted space? I gave you space. You wanted time to figure things out? I'm giving you time. What's the problem?" "The problem is I can't access our money. That's not fair," she said. "Our money," I repeated slowly. Interesting choice of words. "Tell me, what have you been spending our money on during your break?" She got that deer in headlights look that people get when they realize they're about to be caught in a lie. "What do you mean?" she asked weakly. "I mean you asked for a break Tuesday night, and by Wednesday you'd already racked up hotel charges and restaurant bills. That's pretty fast work for someone who's supposedly just staying at Beth's place doing some soul searching." Her face went completely white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" "Because I talked to Beth Thursday night. Funny thing, she hasn't seen you in over 2 weeks. So either Beth's lying or you are. Which one do you think it is?" Lisa just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She was desperately trying to come up with some explanation that didn't involve admitting she'd been caught in a lie from day one of this supposed break. "Jake, I can explain," she started weakly. "I'm sure you can," I cut her off. "You've always been creative. But before you start explaining, there's something you should see." I reached behind my chair and pulled out a manila folder that had been sitting there since Friday, waiting for exactly this moment. Inside were printed copies of every Slack message between her and Derek, every incriminating photo, every timeline of lies I had carefully documented. Her eyes went wide when she saw the folder. "What is that?" "This is what I've been doing with my time while you've been finding yourself," I said, sliding the folder across the coffee table toward her. "Go ahead, take a look. It's all yours." She opened it with trembling hands and started reading the first page. Screenshots of their earliest messages from February. I watched her face transform from confusion to horror to pure panic as she realized exactly how much I knew about her secret relationship. "Jake, these are taken out of context," she said desperately. "Really? What's the context for 'can't wait to taste you again'?" I asked. "Or your husband working late again? Perfect timing." I'm genuinely curious how those could be misunderstood. She kept flipping through the pages, seeing months of evidence laid out in chronological order. The hotel receipts that lined up perfectly with their message timestamps. The photos they'd sent each other. The conversations about planning their romantic Belize trip with money from our divorce settlement. "You went through my private messages," she said, grasping for some kind of moral high ground. "Your messages on our shared laptop that you left logged in," I corrected her. "Nothing private about using household equipment for your affair planning." That's when she started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. She was finally realizing that her perfect little scheme had been completely exposed, and there was absolutely no way to spin this in her favor. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she said through her tears. "Sure you did. You planned this for months," I replied matter-of-factly. "The only thing you didn't plan on was getting caught." I reached behind the chair again and pulled out another envelope, this one thick and official-looking with a law firm's return address. "What's that?" she whispered. "Divorce papers citing adultery, dissipation of marital assets, and fraud," I said. "Your boyfriend Derek says hi, by the way." Her hands were shaking as she took the envelope from me. That's when my doorbell rang with perfect timing. "Oh, that'll be for you," I said, getting up to answer it. The process server was right on time, just as Patricia had promised. He was a professional-looking guy in a suit carrying a clipboard, clearly someone who did this every day for a living. "Lisa Walsh?" he asked, looking past me to where she was sitting on the couch, still holding the divorce papers. "That's her," I confirmed. "You've been served," he told her officially, handing over another set of legal documents. "Have a good day." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Lisa sitting there holding 2 sets of legal papers and looking like her entire world had just collapsed. Which, to be fair, it had. The joint accounts will stay frozen until this gets resolved, I told her, sitting back down calmly. You'll have access to whatever's in your personal checking account. Your lawyer can explain the rest of the details. My lawyer? She asked, sounding confused. Yeah, my lawyer talked to yours Friday afternoon, I said. Apparently you hired them Wednesday, same day you started your break. Amazing coincidence, right? She wasn't even trying to deny anything anymore. The evidence was completely overwhelming, and we both knew it. There was no story she could tell that would explain away months of documented deception. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't afford a hotel every night. That's not really my problem anymore, I said without emotion. But I hear Derek has a nice place. You've certainly spent enough time there this weekend. Her head snapped up in shock. How do you... Your stuff is packed and waiting in the garage, I continued, cutting off her question. Everything except furniture and household items. There's also a check for your personal contributions to joint expenses. I calculated it out to be fair. She stared at me like I was a complete stranger, which I suppose I was to her now. You really planned all this out, she said, almost in awe. Someone had to, I replied. You were too busy planning your escape to think about the details. It took her 5 trips to load everything into the car. We worked in complete silence, her crying quietly, me just wanting the whole thing to be over with. When she was finally done, she stood in the driveway looking at our house like she was seeing it for the last time, which she was. She got in the car and drove away without another word. I watched until the taillights disappeared around the corner, then went back inside to my quiet house. For the first time in months, everything felt genuinely peaceful. That peaceful feeling didn't last very long, unfortunately. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with calls and messages. First, it was Lisa's sister Kelly, then her mom, then a couple of our mutual friends, all with variations of the same message. What the hell is wrong with you? Lisa's devastated. How could you be so cruel? It turned out that Lisa had spent the previous night making phone calls, spinning her own version of events to anyone who would listen. According to her carefully crafted story, I was a controlling husband who couldn't handle her needing some independence. She'd asked for a completely innocent break to work on herself and her personal growth, and I had responded by freezing bank accounts and filing for divorce like some kind of psychopath. There was no mention of Derek, obviously. No mention of the months of planning and lying. No mention of using our money to fund hotel visits with her affair partner. Just poor Lisa, innocent victim of her unreasonable husband who couldn't support her personal growth journey. Her mom actually had the audacity to call me directly around 11 a.m. Monday morning. Jake, she said, in that disappointed tone that mothers-in-law perfect over the years. I just got off the phone with Lisa, and she's absolutely heartbroken. Don't you think you're being a little extreme? Marriage is about working through problems, not running to lawyers at the first sign of trouble. First sign of trouble? I asked, genuinely amazed at what Lisa had told her. Helen, how much did Lisa tell you about this break she wanted? She said she needed some time to figure herself out, Helen replied. That's perfectly normal for people your age. But instead of being supportive, you immediately jump to divorce. That's not how marriage works. I could tell Helen genuinely believed what she was saying. Lisa had sold her the completely sanitized version where she was just a confused young woman trying to find herself. I spent the next 25 minutes walking Helen through the evidence, not the graphic stuff, but enough to paint the real picture. The fake Beth story, the hotel receipts, the messages with Derek, the timeline showing this was all planned in advance. Helen went quiet for a very long time after I finished explaining everything. Finally, she said, "Do you have proof of all this? I've got screenshots, bank statements, GPS tracking data, and about 4 months of documentation," I told her. Lisa's lawyer has copies of everything. Another long pause. I need to call you back, she said. And I knew Lisa's damage control campaign was about to hit a major snag. Tuesday morning, I got a call from Lisa's dad, Richard. Now, Richard and I had always gotten along great. He was old school, had worked in plumbing his whole life, and believed in honesty and hard work. He reminded me a lot of my own father in many ways. "Jake," he said, and his voice was different, much colder than usual. "Helen showed me the evidence you gave her. Is all that true?" "Every word. I can send you copies if you want to verify it yourself," I offered. He muttered something I couldn't make out, then said, "I gave that girl everything. Paid for her college, helped you guys with the wedding, always tried to support her dreams, and this is what she does." Richard, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I know this is hard, I said. Hard? He laughed, but there was no humor in it whatsoever. You know what's hard? Finding out your daughter is just like her mother. Lisa's parents had divorced 2 years earlier when her mom had an affair with her yoga instructor. Real original choice there. Apparently, the apple didn't fall far from the tree, and Richard was seeing the pattern repeat itself with his daughter. Within hours, Richard had called the rest of Lisa's family with the real story. Suddenly, the narrative shifted completely from poor Lisa to what the hell is wrong with that girl? Her support network collapsed faster than a house of cards once people knew the truth. But that was just the beginning of Lisa's problems. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from Patricia with an interesting update. Lisa's lawyer wants to discuss settlement terms, she said. Apparently, they're no longer interested in fighting the adultery claims. What kind of settlement are they talking about? I asked. Basically, they want to minimize her financial exposure, Patricia explained. She's offering to waive any claim to the house, retirement accounts, or alimony in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. What's the catch? No catch from a legal standpoint, Patricia said. She's basically admitting fault and giving up everything to avoid a public trial. But I suspect there's more to this than just wanting privacy. Patricia was absolutely right. There was definitely more to this sudden change in strategy than just avoiding embarrassment. Thursday morning, I decided to do some research into Lisa and Derek's workplace situation. Their company was one of those tech advertising agencies that prides itself on corporate culture and ethical business practices. The kind of place that has value statements plastered all over their website about integrity and professionalism. I pulled up their employee handbook online. Most of it was publicly available since they were always recruiting new talent and wanted to showcase their progressive workplace policies. Buried in Section 14.2 was their professional conduct policy, which specifically prohibited using company resources for personal relationships, fraudulent expense reporting, and conduct that reflects poorly on company values. This was very interesting information. You see, all those Slack messages between Lisa and Derek? That was company property, company time, company equipment, company servers, and those client dinners and late meetings that were really hotel visits? If they were claiming those as business expenses, that constituted fraud. I started cross-referencing Lisa's calendar with her expense reports, which I had access to through our shared financial accounts. She had been incredibly sloppy about it, probably figuring no one would ever think to check. But there it was, dozens of meals and travel expenses that didn't match up with actual business activities. I compiled everything into a neat professional package. Patricia helped me send it through proper legal channels to their company's HR department and corporate ethics hotline. It was submitted as an anonymous tip, but backed up with documentation that would be impossible to deny or dismiss. The response was swift and absolutely brutal. Friday afternoon, Derek got called into HR for what he probably thought was a routine meeting. By Tuesday morning, he was cleaning out his desk with a security escort. Apparently claiming overtime for hours, he was actually spending at hotels with a married coworker, violated about 7 different company policies. Plus, the fraudulent expense reports and using company Slack for explicit communications made it an easy termination decision. Lisa lasted exactly 1 week longer than Derek. They gave her a chance to explain the expense discrepancies, but she couldn't do it without admitting to the affair. When they showed her the Slack messages during her disciplinary meeting, she broke down completely and confessed everything. Both of them were fired within 3 weeks. Not just fired, but terminated for cause, which meant no severance pay, no unemployment benefits, and not eligible for rehire. There would also be permanent flags in their employment records. But wait, there's more to this story. Their company takes ethics violations very seriously, so seriously that they reported the fraudulent expense claims to their business insurance carrier. It turns out that when employees commit fraud using company resources, that can void certain coverage protections. Long story short, both Lisa and Derek were now facing potential civil liability for the money they'd cost the company through fraudulent reporting. We're talking about repaying thousands in fake expense claims plus legal fees. Lisa's lawyer called Patricia Friday afternoon, practically begging for a settlement conference. They want this to go away quickly, Patricia told me with obvious satisfaction. Your wife is facing unemployment, potential civil lawsuits from her former employer, and now her family knows the truth. She's got no leverage left whatsoever. What's she offering now? I asked. Everything, Patricia said. House, retirement accounts, cars, savings. She wants nothing except her personal belongings and whatever's left in her checking account. In exchange, she wants the divorce finalized as soon as possible with no public proceedings. I thought about it for exactly 15 seconds. Deal. But I want it in writing that she can never contact me again except through lawyers. And she has to sign a non-disclosure agreement about our marriage. Done, Patricia said immediately. By the following Friday, Lisa had signed papers giving up any claim to anything we'd built together during our marriage. No alimony, no asset split, absolutely nothing. She got to walk away with her clothes and about $630 in her personal checking account. The divorce was finalized 7 weeks later. The fastest uncontested divorce in county history, according to Patricia. I haven't heard from Lisa since that day, and honestly, I hope I never do. Looking back on everything, I'm actually grateful it happened the way it did. Not grateful for the betrayal. That sucked, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But grateful that I found out when I did, before we had kids or bought a bigger house or got more financially tangled together. It could have been a lot worse if I'd been the trusting husband who never questioned anything and just accepted whatever story I was told. Sometimes paying attention to the details and trusting your instincts can save your ass. And sometimes, the people you trust most are the ones planning to screw you over the hardest. Lesson learned.